I really want to start by thanking UCC because my description of leadership is being able to surface some reality that people don't often deal with, don't take serious, and bring it to the fore and help people or a country or a community to adapt. And UCC is doing this, and really, Julian, I want to thank you on behalf of your leadership, the leadership of your CEO and your institution, for thinking about this area that we don't wake up and often see in our newspapers, or they don't sit in cabinet rooms, they don't advise government officials, they don't sit with ministers, but they really are a fantastic group of people that can shape the future of the country we want because of the stories they tell. So I want us to clap for UCC for that. So the work that we do at the advisory committee is fourfold, and this is why we do this. The industrialized countries, the newly industrializing countries. I'm a child of the 90s. That's when I became politically conscious, socially conscious, began to read, began to write, began to do some things. The countries that were industrializing at that time, the South Koreas, even China, Singapore, they had a vastly different global environment in which they operated that gave them a leap forward that those of us in Africa who are coming late don't often have. There was no climate change. Nobody cared so much about plastics at that time, how many chemicals go in food. Now people are very health conscious. Things are put up every day to stop us from growing. So I can't be happier to be in a room where people are saying, but there's another way. There's another way that we can export something that is not meat, is not fish. So I thank you, Jules, for really inviting me to be part of this. I also couldn't be happy. I'm glad that we are not speaking about data, information, the things you hear with young people. We are speaking about film and movies because a country's ability and its people to tell compelling stories, restorative stories, healing stories, curative stories, inspiring stories. Because, one of the biggest problems businesses and countries face is the inability to raise above noise. There's just too much noise in the world and very limited signal. And I feel that movies and films give us that ability because life for us as human beings is a perspective. You are who you are because you are raised with a particular perspective. And we transfer these perspectives in conversations. And Africans are very conversational. What's so different about our country? What's so different about Africa? And I feel that movies based on stories are a wonderful way to establish a point of difference for a country. I'm focusing on stories because storytelling is such a powerful way to start a conversation on movies, on this film industry. So I take storytelling we have 5 tests. You know the meaning of the word test. Something's either salty or bitter or sweet. There's something called umami. Umami is the 5th test, which is a mother's milk. But those 5 for me are not even final. There's something called flavor. Flavor is much higher than taste. Flavor is auditory. When you hear someone crunching something. So I take movies and stories as flavor, and the rest of the exports as just taste. Okay? And so storytelling requires articulation. Articulation. That word is a beautiful word because I can say so many things, but if I don't hold your mind to something that you carry away, I have not articulated this very well. So Uganda retains a source of great untold stories. If the US, which is a large exporter of cultural products, is still digging around its history for new stories. So recently I watched Martin Scorsese's, who knows the movie that was released in December or January, called The Killers of the Moonflower. It's DiCaprio and Robert De Niro. And it's based on a story in Oklahoma of a small group of people called the Osage Nation, who are like Nigerians or Ugandans in the early 1900s. A lot of sit on the resources and you don't know, but someone who's knowledgeable comes and deals with you and causes you a lot of problems. It's based on a book by David Gran, same title if you like reading. And so the US is still digging around for stories, but we have so many untold stories in Uganda that if I tell you one of them, you would think, who has done a movie on that, and we export it. So, we have this group of people that live in the equatorial portions of our country, Eastern Congo, Western Uganda. They also live in parts of Rwanda and Burundi. They are called the Twa people. So the Twa people, sometimes we call them the Pygmies. There are not many in the world. They are like about 40,000. Yeah? They remained that number for the last 100, 200, 300 years. And a few people that I know ask a question. Life is about asking questions. Why? So someone said, but we've had immunization in Uganda. In 1986, we were only 14 million people. Now we are hitting 50. So there's 1.3 million children added every year. Why have these people remained the same number? And why has anyone not done a short documentary on answering that question? So just without wasting your time, it's a story I'm kind of thinking someone need to dig around. So friends of mine, I kept asking, and they went in their meals at dinner to look at what they eat. And they found among their foods, there's this climbing potato. It's not underground, it climbs on trees. So they harvest it with long sticks. They cut it into pieces, they cook it. Very healthy fruit. And its scientific name is Diascovia baia. And Diascovia baia has birth-reducing properties. It is natural contraception. But that's a story that has not been told. I could tell you many. I grew up in a community that you sit around the fire with your elders, and in Western Uganda, there's a story of a man called Ishekatabazi, who was like a buffoon, but really smart. And he would say some weird things. I can hear some people laugh. They know who Ishekatabazi is. So someone compiled those stories in a book. His name is Benedicto Mbangizi and Katate, I think, in the 1950s. And one of the Ishekatabazi stories, so you have this plant that he visited late evening, and the plant, this was July, very dry season, and every other plant in the area is gone. But this plant is luxurious, it's green. So he thinks it will make a meal at midnight, and he will have the meal of that plant. So he sits and waits throughout the night, and at 5 a.m. he gets his stick, he beats it up, he says, "You're stupid, you have hidden from me." Your story goes on and on and on, but here is the moral of what I'm trying to tell you. So we find years later that that plant that is kept luxurious in the dry season by natural conditions is called Phytolacca dodecandra. And if you crush that plant and drop it in watering holes, the cows don't get worms, children don't get worms. How will you know that story if you've not sat at the foot of old people who were never able to write? The work that Passade does, you see how I can tell stories and I forgot to tell you what Passade does. So because of this changed global environment, this committee focuses on four things. First, don't get to the markets blindly. Markets are closed to you. They are given to you with one hand, they are taken away with another. So before you take your product to a market, conduct dipstick survey. Understand tastes and preferences. Don't just ship your milk to Nigeria because Nigeria is eating Indomie and I also can bring milk. No, think through why they eat Indomie and they won't take your powdered milk. You do that by appointing trade representatives. You do that by setting up trade hubs. The second thing we do is that markets tell you that you must develop particular standards, phytosanitary standards, film standards, copyright standards. You will not be able to go to the market unless your country has rules and regulations that are credible, globally reliable to attract investment. That's something we're working on. In the food sector, I thank Jules for now, Brenda, introducing to us this film side. We need to now think seriously and have on our agenda in July, this for the African Americans coming here. How do you invest in this sector of people who speak good English, who are young, who are welcoming? So the third thing we do is that even when you have the market and you work on the standards, you don't have the necessary infrastructure to compete. Infrastructure is both hard and soft. If your labs are not functioning and you have to take lab tests for products in the neighborhood has left you before you start the journey. So even if you have those three, you are exporting things at 19% interest rate. You go to commercial banks when you have an export order. We are trying to change that by ensuring that when the Chinese gets an order for these bottles and goes to the China People's Bank and gets it at 1%, he or she will dominate your market unless you have a counter force, a reaction in terms of how do I sell to them. So Chinese put up particular protocols signed in Beijing, but what they don't tell you is that they will not give you money to trade. I don't know any country that gives another country money to market itself. It has to be done by us, by the small and big decisions we make in private and public sector. So we are putting up a fund. We started with a small fund of $10 million for agricultural products and services and content, one of them. So if you have an order for a product, you come to this fund, it has young people running it now. You show that if you do this, you'll be paid next July, and you require working capital to get this done and underwrite this invoice. So those are the four things we are doing. I want to stop here. I can go on and on. I don't know if I've been helpful to you by talking about things.